How y'all doing? Good. Yeah? What else is there besides the body? Spirit? Spirit. Spirit's alive and well, no matter what, yeah? Amen? Okay, I want to sit down. That's it, that's all I got for you. What else do we need to know, right? Well, we already heard a lot about peace. What should I talk about? There was a king who decided that he wanted an artist to commission an artist to paint the most perfect picture of peace. So the great artisans of the kingdom all contributed, and it got down to two the king liked the most, and he hadn't decided. So they displayed them, and the first picture was a picture of a calm, pristine lake on a beautiful day with blue sky and white fluffy clouds and birds in the air and animals grazing near the water, and kind of a traditional picture of peace according to human understanding. And the other one was a picture which was of a very violent storm happening in a rugged mountain landscape. Lightning was crashing, thunder, and there was a water that was coming over the edge of a cliff into this enormous waterfall. And the sky was dark, and it was quite violent looking. And the king said, "That's picture, that's the one that represents peace for me." And they all said, "Well, how could that be the best picture to depict peace?" And he said, "Well, look carefully." And behind the waterfall, there was a bush, and on the bush there was a bird. And the bird had a nest, and there was some eggs in the nest. And the bird, the mama bird, was sitting in perfect peace. And the king said, "Peace is not when everything is perfect and calm. Peace is when life is tumultuous, filled with, raging situations, circumstances, the less than ideal situations in which one can still find their peace." So that's really the journey for us, is how do we find that peaceful place in the midst of less than ideal circumstances? Because, in every life, a little rain must fall, yes? So we do celebrate Jesus' birth this time of year, and in Unity, we have a different understanding of the significance of the birth of Jesus, and we take it according to what we believe was his essential teaching, was that Jesus didn't come to be the great exception that we would all worship as one who was the savior for all people, but that we would look at his life and look at his spiritual journey and recognize it as one path that we could follow as well. That Jesus became this way shower that we could follow to this great experience of love and peace, which he demonstrated, not just taught, but lived, modeled, and knew to be his reality. A Course in Miracles has a great line here for this particular season, and it's to Jesus, and he says, "It is in your power to make the season holy, for it is in your power to make the time of Christ be now." Be now. The first coming of Christ is merely another name for the creation, for Christ is the Son of God. The second coming of Christ means nothing more than the end of the ego's rule and the healing of the end of the ego's rule and the healing of the mind. That's the second coming. He said, I was created like you in the first, and I have called you to join me in the second. Will we join him? Yes. And that's a moment by moment thing, isn't it? It isn't that baptism or that catechism or that unity basics class or when you decided to join a church. You know, membership in the I am aligned with the teachings of Jesus, or I am aligned with the teachings of truth, is a moment by moment commitment. The church is here asking us to, recommit our membership now, and that's important to the organization so that we have continuity and we are in integrity with the community that we call our spiritual home. More fundamental to the experience that you and I have every day of our life is, are we in league with our commitment to live from this spiritual center? And life will challenge us, yes, over and over, tempting us to, just like Jesus was tempted in the desert, to listen to the voice of the ego, yes? That would have us stray away from knowing that we are love itself, that we are peace, that we are connected with the infinite love and life of God. And, at the time of Jesus showing up on the scene, there was this great Messiah expectation. You know this. The Jewish people had been predicting that one would come that they called the Messiah, was going to save them from their trials and tribulations. And we know that they had many trials and tribulations. And at the time of Jesus, they were under the oppression of the Roman occupation, yes? And they saw when Jesus arrived on the scene, he seemed to fit the bill. He seemed to have all the qualifications. They expected him to be a typical Messiah, and a typical Messiah would be a political and military ruler who would basically kick butt. And Jesus arrived on the scene, and instead of providing the political and military deliverance of the people from the oppression that they were under, ends up being one who delivers them in a spiritual context from their suffering. And how does he do that? And how does he do that in this moment? By instead of pointing to all of the things that seem to be against us in the world, those people, those situations, the government, the taxes, the whatever, Jesus said, don't look outside of yourself in order to find that peace. He had turned us inward. He said, turn around. He said, the kingdom of God is within you. So when they were all expecting him, to overthrow the Romans and throw them out of Jerusalem and restore peace the way that the world thinks about peace, which is you get rid of the conflict and then you have peace. And Jesus says, no, you got it backwards. You find peace in yourself, and then you bring that peaceful presence into the world, and you bring peace from the consciousness of your own peace. And he said, it's not something apart from you, and it's not a condition. It's not something that comes secondarily. It's not like if you do this, then you'll get peace. And we all have our own story about that, don't we? If this person would just be this way, I'd be a lot more peaceful. If I had more money, if I had a better job, we have our list of conditions that we put upon the spiritual reality. And Jesus said the spiritual reality has no conditions because it's who you are. It's not just something that comes to you by some sort of by you praying right or by you giving, tithing to the church or providing service or being a good person or doing, any number of obeying of commandments. He says, you were made in the image and likeness of God. Don't you know that you are God's? He said. Couldn't be any more clear than that. So the problem that you and I have is not that we need to make our life better so that we can find peace. It's that we can make this inward journey. And it's a conscious thing. It's something that we have to do consciously, moment by moment. Yes? And the sooner we sort of give up this Messiah complex, which is when this happens, when this circumstance happens, then I'll be all right. As soon as we give that up, then we take away the escape route or the ace in the hole that we've been holding for keeping us out of the kingdom. Because as soon as I make a demand upon the universe to be a particular way, and it doesn't turn out that way, what happens? Does the universe get frustrated because I'm frustrated? Life goes on. Life goes on. Yeah, there's one real simple thing, and many of the modern day teachers talk about this as well, and they say, Eckhart Tolle says this, he says it's the gap between the way it is and what you want that causes all the suffering. Oh, no, really? That again? You mean I don't get my way? No, you don't. Because how do you know that your way is the only way? Wouldn't that be a world that we wouldn't want to live in? Who are we going to put in charge of the universe? You know, who of us should be in charge of how things should be? I mean, have we ever been wrong about how things should be? Even when we were so convinced, I know what should be happening here. It isn't this, it should be this. And sometimes later on, we find out that how things turned out had a silver lining, had turned out to be something that was extraordinarily helpful, and had it gone the other way, it might very well have kept us even more in a difficult situation or out of peace or behind the eight ball. Yeah? So when we can acknowledge that life is going to do what life is going to do. Yes, we have a little bit of control over it, but we assume way too much that we should be able to control life and that we know how life should be. So how do we get to this peace when life doesn't go our way? Well, I think what's really helpful is you've heard this said before, that if you can just accept life the way it goes, you'll be a lot happier, right? You've all heard this. So how do you accept things? Because isn't that really what's so hard? And that has us leading to being what the opposite of acceptance is: resistance, pushing back against life, believing life is against us. All these things that we do with our surface mind, our human understanding. So this is a little subtle, so I hope I can present this to you, and then we'll talk about it maybe in conversation. So what doesn't work is me telling you this, or me telling me this, which is what happens all the times when I'm by myself and I'm dealing with something I don't like. I say to myself, you should just accept this, Larry. Just accept this. This is what's happening. This is what is. This is reality. It's just what is. So you need to accept it. Well, how well does that work? If it's a level of the mind, you know what it does? You know this. It puts you in more resistance. First of all, you're resisting what's happening. And then you have a second thought, which the Buddhists call the second arrow of suffering, is when you go, oh, well, I shouldn't be thinking that. I shouldn't be resisting that. So you do this sort of virtuous thing where, oh, I'm going to be more spiritual. Oh, I'm going to be more spiritual. I'm going to accept this. And your mind goes nuts. Your mind goes, not only do I not get what I want here, then I'm doing it wrong because I'm not accepting. And it's the double arrow. And you have strengthened that part of you that is separate from truth. Do we want to strengthen the part that is separate from truth, or do we want to dissolve it? Dissolve it. So that kind of acceptance doesn't work. So what kind of acceptance are we talking about that actually works? It's kind of a trick question, because it isn't a volitional kind of acceptance. It isn't the kind of decision that you decide. That's what we just referenced, and that actually will take us farther from peace. What we need to discover is a deeper experience of what we're dealing with. And a simple way of doing it is when something happens or something is happening, or so the reality in your life that you don't like, is you just allow it to be there. You don't have to give it a plus or a minus. Just notice that this is what's happening. And then see if you can find a little bit of space around it in you. Because typically, if we don't like something, there's some tension in our body. Usually we hold it, in our gut or in our chest. Maybe it's in our head. But see if by not being for or against it, just neutral, see if you can find a little space. Okay. And you can say, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. Okay. Can I find some space around it? And you actually have the ability to do just that. You can find space. And the reason you can find space is why? It's because your spiritual nature is nothing but space. It's metaphysical, right? It's not a physical thing. We're very much aware of the physicality of our being, but our spiritual nature is empty, open, allowing, spacious. So what we're looking for in those moments is to move ourselves back to our true nature. And the more that we can come back to the sense of being itself, which is non-physical, it has no capacity to push back. It doesn't resist anything. And a good metaphor for it, and I've used it here before, is the space in this room. What does the space in this room have to do to accommodate anything and everything that might happen in this room? What does it have to do?
Just be space.
It just has to be itself, right? And it doesn't have to do anything. It allows whatever occurs here to happen. Because it's not what? It's not threatened by what happens here, is it? Is space threatened by what happens in here? I mean, if there was a fire in here, if there was, no matter what would happen in here, people were fighting and jumping up and down, would the space be affected? This is what we need to understand about our true nature, is we are spiritual beings. And as spiritual beings, we have the same sort of open, allowing, spacious capacity to be with life. Now, our bodies may not be happy about it, our minds may not be happy about it, but the spaciousness where we are established in our spaciousness, then we have the capacity to be with whatever arises and experience no resistance. This is what I think Jesus was alluding to in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's not quite interpreted that way typically, but think of it this way. So he's facing a horrible fate, and he has a moment like you and I do, and he goes, I don't really like this. Every reason to resist, yes? Peace, not so much. His first reaction is not allowing, it's not accepting. His first reaction is, I don't want this. Take this. And then we know Jesus was someone who was connected with the truth of his being and had a human moment. But he never stayed there. And neither do we have to. And so he surrendered that experience of resistance and the angst that was coming with that out of his deepest desire to know the truth of his being. He yielded to the truth of his being to provide him with a context in which he could allow this to transpire if it needed to transpire, knowing that what he was really about was to reveal his spiritual reality. He was there for the resurrection. And if the crucifixion was the lesson that one would need to go through in order to reveal that he was not in fact a body, but that he truly was a spiritual being, just like the space in this room, it would not be affected, would not be harmed, would not be stained by any circumstance or condition. And he said, not my will, but thine be done. That wasn't a caveat to a mean and angry and vengeful God that was going to have him killed. That was a giving over to his higher self, in which he wanted to realize and reveal and validate the truth of his spiritual nature. See, this is what you and I can do when we're in those situations. Rather than arguing with ourselves because we're not being spiritual enough, we can just pray, if you will, ask to be shown the way to be with this situation that can be graceful, that can be where we can be with it without judgment, without ups or downs, recognizing that the Spirit reveals to us what we can never know for ourselves, that we will be all right, that no matter what happens, we'll be all right. And that knowing allows us to have a sense of composure, a sense of peace, a sense of equanimity that allows us to be in the midst of the storm and not be afraid. Remember when Jesus was with the disciples and the storm came up and he said, peace, be still. And they said, oh, you've commanded the seas with your great magic. But what he had done was he had established himself in the knowing that he could not be harmed, nor could they. And when we bring that energy, when we bring that knowing to our lives, to a situation, then we imbue that situation with a peaceful presence. Presence of peace is something we carry with us all the time. It isn't a preferred outcome to a conflict. It's dissolving the part of us that feels separate from the peace that is within us, that brings us the peace that we seek. Does this make sense? Okay, good. Any butts? Any butts in the room? So we could go to meditation, but if we have some thought. Oh, it's a phone. We know. We all have moments like that. And, you know, what it sounded like is like, you know, like, okay, your time is up. You know, like in the game shows where you hear a little That's what I thought. Anyway, so that was a comic relief there for us. Anyone have a thought about this? A comment, a question? Please. Oh yeah, let me get can we wait for the mic just so this can go out to the Zoomlandia?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so when I'm in the midst of that unease, lack of peace, I try to find the spaciousness, like you say. And then when I do, I seek what it is I need or what it is I value that isn't present. And I think that's what you're speaking to when you probably said it better than me, and I don't really remember what you said.
No,
but,
that's absolutely right, because when you get in that place, then your wisdom can come forward. And instead of being in reaction, you can be more proactive to what the situation needs.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But like you said, in the moment with Christ, he the whole your will, not mine, be done. I mean, I don't know. That's the spiritual part that I'm still seeking, you know, because growing up in Episcopalian church and then coming to Unity, I always kind of feared God because, like, oh, he loves us. Look what he did to his son. You
Right.
know?
Yes.
So I'm still seeking.
That's a whole nother conversation, but it's a good one. And I would say,
Get this away from me.
I would say, before we go on to the next person, I would say that question is one you take to your deep knowing in your heart. Don't go to the theology of your past. If we believe that we are spiritual beings, and of course this is what Jesus said, you are God's, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So this is where we want to go. We don't want to try to understand man's version of religion. This is a whole thing, but what we got, Christianity, is not the teachings of Jesus. It was the writings of Paul and James that had everything to do with what they decided, and then the doctrines that came from that, and then there was the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and Jesus became the only begotten Son of God, and this whole story was around the Christian religion. Teachings of Jesus are what unity is based on and what we believe. Jesus pointed us inward to discover the truth of our own being, that we are connected to God all the time, 24/7. It doesn't require anything that we need to do to make that true, but to make it real for us, we need to go within our own hearts and discover that, quote, voice to remind us of who we really are. So if you can make that journey and do it from a place of love, I think you'll find it. It does take time because we've had a lot of conditioning, many of us. Yes.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that you have just given me the ability to use the space outside of myself instead of staying inside and trying to figure it out.
Okay. Thank you. Andrew.
I would just like to add that from the readings that I've done from Stephen Levine's work, he talks a lot about mindfulness, which I think is one of the ways to find that spaciousness. And he uses the example that if my fist is clenched because I want to hit somebody or hit out at a situation that I don't like, if I can look at the fist and say, look how angry I am, the fist softens because I can't be in the anger and witness the anger at the same time. So there's the spaciousness.
Yes.
Which is really an amazing
and being mindful. That's so true.
Really powerful tool.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
A couple months ago, the meditation group that I go to on Saturdays had a really good one. They said to picture yourself as this big, huge mountain, and you're solid, you're that mountain, and but all this weather is happening to you, all of this rain and wind and storms and everything, and it's all going on around you, but you're the mountain, and you just continue being the mountain and let it pass by.
Beautiful. There's a I don't know where it comes from, the Tao Te Ching or something, but stand like mountain, flow like river. So it depends on the situation. Sometimes standing like a mountain, is the most apt metaphor or association. Flow like river. When you're in a situation where you need to be flexible, you need to sort of go with the flow. So yeah, I just add that. Yeah.
Mary, thank you for the message. I'm curious about how do you deal with the news that are bombarding us, because the reality is there, about all the violence going on. And to me, when I think about peace and this time of the year and the love, I just feel hopeless because it's like since the history of mankind, there's always been violence and killing and all the other things that come out of the worst part of human nature. So I'm curious as you deliver this message, how do you personally deal with it? I mean, it's like, do you isolate yourself from the news?
Mm.
Just go inward and put a space, and pray and imagine a better world? How do you do it?
You know, I think we all have to find our own way. Clearly, the world is not centered in this truth that we talked about this morning. All we can do is, we have to follow a path. And if this is a path with heart, take it. That's what I would say. You can't affect everyone, but truly, if you change your heart, if you find a path to peace, you will be a peaceful presence in the world. And we know that there are people, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and others, who were so grounded in this peaceful understanding that they lived it from their own knowing, their own heart, that they became an agent of change in the world. So if we could all do our little part, in our little circles, whether it's our family, our community, our organization, wherever we are, our work life, even with our partner. Denise and I have been doing nonviolent communication practices for decades in our marriage, and now we teach it, to other people. But I think that instead of thinking it as a grand problem, is make it a manageable laboratory, and bring your own understanding, deepen your own understanding as far as you can go in this lifetime. Maybe it'll take you all the way to full realization, and you will be one who we will come and listen to. Not that I see myself that way, but the journey is, we're all invited to take this journey, every one of us. And that journey is to know yourself, your true nature. And it usually means backing up from the way we see ourselves as a separate self and a body and a mind. We have to go deeper and deeper into who am I really? Who am I really? And some of these ways, these practices that we've talked about here, which is to recognize that your mind changes, your body changes, all those things change. What doesn't change? Find the part of you that doesn't change. Find the part of you that is constant, that is consistent, that was there at 5 years old and 10 years old, and when you were 20 and 30 and 40. Find that part of you. That's yourself. That's your true self. And that true self does not have an issue with the way things are in the world. It has full equanimity. It's peace, and its very nature is peace. And when you are grounded in that, the more you're grounded in that, the more you realize that when life happens the way it's going to happen, you find less and less you're not reactive, you're not resisting, because you're not meeting life situations from that feeling of being a separate self. You're meeting life more and more from who you truly are, this capacious, spacious heart space in which you can allow it to be. And then you can take wise action. Then the wisdom can come to you. What should I do in this situation? Like Martin Luther King, we'll use nonviolent civil disobedience, things like that.
Renee and I grapple with this situation almost every day about what to take in, what to let into your consciousness, how much news to watch, what do you do about it if you do watch it. None of us are under any obligation to keep feeding ourselves the darkness. The world has always been as it is. We're just hyper aware of it now because we have news feeds 24/7 telling us what's going on. It's always been this way. So it's up to us to choose what we let in, and like Larry says, what we do with the information once we've observed it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, we sometimes have to balance between being informed, right? Being informed, knowing what's going on, and then, having a sufficient sense of self so that we don't allow ourselves to be become cynical and jaded, which is very easy to do if you just take that in as this is the way it is. And balance it with some stories where people are doing kind and generous things too, because that's also the truth of us.
I just wanted to say that my egoic part has tricked me for years into thinking I'm a spiritual warrior. And by its interpretation, mind you, not the divine. And in that vein, I have a very dear friend. His name is Kevin. And he has suffered most tremendously in this life. He took a drug many years ago called interferon to take care of the hep C that he had contracted. And interferon is a drug that it just continues to create havoc in the body, and it worsens over time, and there's no way out in the third dimension. So in the process of being aware of his suffering, which is a microcosm of the whole world, the tremendous suffering that we are aware of here, I'm studying with this wise person online, and I got an opportunity to ask the question of the divine, just stop the suffering. I was adamant. I was angry. Stop the suffering. At least stop the pain that he's going through. If he has to succumb anytime soon, we all have to do that, but stop the pain. I was really adamant, and I'm very defiant, even with God. It's been my nemesis. And I got an answer that day through this other individual, and the answer was, how many lifetimes do you want him to suffer like this? And whoa, was I put in my place of humility, because I don't know his journey, my friend's journey. I don't know his journey. I don't know why he is suffering as he is. I have no idea about any of it, clueless even. And how I have the audacity to come before the divine and make demands when I don't have the overall picture of everyone. And so when I was speaking today about what do we do in prayer, we lift those up in prayer, offering them to the divine, the care, guidance, and protection of the divine, knowing that in their essence, they cannot be harmed. That's the tough part, isn't it? And then you go on with the prayer and you focus on the divine, and you find your presence in your deep center within, and you take that deep breath and you breathe through it and stay centered and focused on the divine while you've lifted them up. And then you give gratitude, full gratitude, for what is transpiring and what has transpired.
Thank you. Yeah, again, it's just like, when life happens, whether it's to us or someone else, and when we rush to judgment, it doesn't come from our wise self. It's certainly understandable, and it certainly comes from that part of us that, we know we don't want to see anyone suffer. We care, we have compassion. We can still have compassion without judging it. And that's sort of living in that balance. And what I was thinking about this week, I'm on YouTube a lot. I listen to a lot of spiritual teachers, and I realize there is it's ubiquitous on the internet. You can find so much spiritual food today. So the fact that we even have 20 people or whatever in this room is remarkable. Of course, this serves us as community. But as much as we see so much what's not working, we see so much evidence of the divisiveness, and feels like the polarity has gotten even more extreme, especially politically. The people are not even listening to facts anymore. They just hitch their wagon to ideology and just say, if this person says it, I believe it. And they say, I don't. Even though that seems to be so divisive, that I think has an end game to it. the more divisive we become, the more polarized we become, the more likely those structures are not going to hold. We all know that which holds is that which is in balance, and that which becomes too extreme cannot stand. So what if those extremes are actually moving us, but seemingly away from the new earth or the good earth or the heaven on earth? And then the ubiquitous of all these spiritual teachings, there's more and more people that are waking up all the time. It used to be you had to spend, 20 years in an ashram with a guru, to finally get the teachings and have the transmission. But today we have teachers all over the internet, and people, everyday people, are waking up to the truth of who they are. So I hold that, with some enthusiasm and some optimism for what's possible. The things maybe do have to get worse before they get better. This is not Pollyannish. I think just from a cosmological point of view or from a sociological point of view, when people become so far apart, the whole thing breaks down, because we will then realize that it's tugging at our heart to see so much divisiveness, and it's going to cause us to let go of our positions and find a way to come back together. At least that's what can happen. It has happened in smaller circles. So please, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think it's on already.
No, it is. There is a lot of heartbreak in this world. Of course there is. We live in a samsaric world, and it weighs heavily. What's happened with me is as I've been able to let my spirit rise and find my higher self, it's helped me to accept heartbreak. And therefore, accepting heartbreak allows my spirit to rise, my higher self to kick in. And that's a good thing, because it's been an interesting journey, a process full of adversity. Hey, I'm grateful for it at this point. But now I'm contemplating of entering, working with young people once again, like teenagers, and being a presence for them, a peaceful presence for them. The world is changing very quickly, so fast. I don't know the wisdom that I've accrued at this point in my life. Certainly I have something to share. I do feel for our young people now. I just don't know how they're handling all this. And I don't think they're handling it well. There is no elderhood left. People are doing their best, but I just see the world changing, not in a good way for young people to enter into and to step into it. It's kind of, daunting to think. I'd be working in a structural, organizational way. I'm not their therapist or anything, but still facing 100 young people a day in a position, just trying to hold that presence of peace or love or wisdom, or it's all going to be okay. It's a little daunting to think about doing it. My friends do it, we all are doing our best, but I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking it.
You can do it!
I'm overthinking it.
Well,
It's not easy.
I think we could all feel overwhelmed, because if we feel like it's up to us, but really it is up to us. And mostly what I get up here and do as a minister is invite people to take this inward journey. And so often when you do that and you deepen that sense of raising up the spirit, becoming more aware of the truth of your being, feeling more peaceful, feeling more centered in your heart, more loving, then that becomes a guidance unto what is the most appropriate thing for you to do, to wise action. The Tao Te Ching has this thing about let the muddy water settle, so that right action arises from that. When that water clears, And first we have to get clear. Otherwise, if we're coming from fear or anxiousness or frustration, our actions usually aren't very wise. They can be reaction. So once you can get yourself to that point and then say, what is mine to do? And, Spirit, God will put someone in front of you. And I've had that happen to me, and I've been that for other people. They put, someone in front of you, and you find the words to say or the thing to do that is just right. And it's beyond you. It isn't just you and your mental ability to ascertain what's best. It's you really surrendering, that you're in charge of this situation, or you're in charge of this person, or you're responsible for this situation. To let that all go, because this is God's child. This is God's, the universe's child. And you'll be guided. I'm sure you already have been. Keep it up, right?
One more comment. Oh, there we go. There's an online on YouTube, Dr. Gabor Mate, who has worked with drug addictions and all kinds of stuff. He's an amazing guy. He was born in a concentration camp, so he has the horrors of that story in his history. And he was a very rabid pro-Israeli. And then he went and he visited Palestine during an upset down there. It's amazing to watch him tell his story of transformation, how he came to have compassion for all of it instead of being polarized. So it can be done, and he's a living example that you can watch, and he tells you his journey through it. Well, it's not very long. It's not a very long video. Gabor Mate, it's amazing, man. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I've kept you over. You've been a perfect class. Some of your stomachs are probably gurgling. It's time to. So let's just have a brief meditation to close this beautiful discussion we've had this morning. Take a deep breath with me, if you will, and just let it go as we let our minds sink into our hearts. Just visualize the mind, thoughts, feelings, just descending into the heart space, followed by a wash of light, just casting out any confusion or frustration, uncertainty, and just leaving you with a feeling that is whole, just as it needs to be, just as you truly are. Jesus said, "My peace I leave with you, not as the world leaves it." And it's a peace that passes all human understanding. Not a peace that rises with getting what we want and falls when we don't. But a peace that transcends the world, circumstances, situations, people, relations. It's a peace that is our essence of who we are. In this peace we live and move and have our being. Jesus invites us to make the season holy by taking this journey inward, remembering who we are, remembering the creation before it was overwritten by the programming of becoming a human in this lifetime, before there was a name, before there was a form. The face of your parents before they were born, your true self. In this place, there is spaciousness that has no bounds. It did not begin with birth. It does not end with bodily death. And it moves through every situation unstained, untarnished, unmoved, whole, with the capacity to be at peace and to give rise to wise action. Let us return to this place as often as we remember, and thereby bring heaven to earth. Thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, all wise teachers. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you.